Night shift workers, what's the creepiest thing that's happened? I work in a prison. When I was new, I was working overtime one night in a housing unit that has seen a lot of death. It was well after midnight, and all of the offenders were supposed to be in their cells. Since this was a medium security prison, the offenders still had access to leave their cell to use the communal bathroom at night. Well, I was going in for the 2 a.m. count. I watched an offender walk down the stairs from the second level and into the bathroom. I stood at the entrance to the bathroom and yelled in to ask them what cell they were in so I could add an extra body to that cell for my count, but got no answer. I then walked into the bathroom and searched everywhere but found absolutely nobody. I told one of my coworkers about what happened, and the first thing they asked me was he tall and skinny with long dreads? And he had been. When I answered yes, I was told, "That's Mr. Bones. He killed himself a few years ago, but he still hangs around." I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I was watching over a Victoria's Secret in this mall overnight, a 2-room affair with a little adjoining space to attach the two. The smaller room was all the fragrant stuff, and the larger room was all the lingerie. There were some contractors putting in some light fixtures, and it was my job to lock up after them and then stay and wait for the daytime manager to arrive. Unfortunately for me, somewhere down the hall of this dark, empty mall was a candy display, of the sort that plays faint carousel music, punctuated with a little girl's laughter. Naturally, they left it running all night, and after the contractors had left, I was all alone in this Victoria's Secret, with the dark, silent halls of the mall, and, every once in a while, a little girl's laughter echoing down the hall. And worse, the Victoria's Secret wasn't one single room, so whenever I'd walk around, I swear the mannequins would move just a little. It felt like being in a horror movie. Technically, we didn't have a night shift when I worked at a tiny private airport, but if a client requested it, someone would stay behind for after-hours services. I didn't mind taking those, as it was a nice commission on top of the overtime pay, and some of the clients tipped really well on top of that. So one night I'm doing after-hours, no issues at all. I get everything taken care of. Passengers are headed home, and crew is headed to their hotel. Terminal is locked up, all good. It was about a 35 to 40-minute drive from the airport to my home, and this place was in the middle of nowhere, so there was really only one road, unless I wanted to go an extra 30 minutes out of my way. I drove this road almost every day, twice a day, for a little over 2 years. I knew it like the back of my hand. There weren't any turnoffs for most of it, and it was a very narrow strip of land between a body of water and thick woods. I'm driving home, I round a corner, and several things happen over the course of about 3 seconds. 1. I see a large, at least 300 feet long, think American football field, farm field to my left, with a house on the other side. There is a light in one window, glowing bright yellow. 2. The road rises up sharply in front of me in a steep hill, curving to the right. 3. My car feels foreign, somehow. Like I suddenly didn't understand how the digital speedometer worked, why the dash was so lit up with screens instead of buttons and dials 4. Another car appears going in the opposite direction, coming down the hill. I'm briefly blinded by their headlights. As I start going up the hill, I rounded the corner at the top and immediately said, "What the fuck," out loud, because 1. The previously mentioned body of water was to the left, and only about 50 feet away at the most. It's a damn ocean, not a river or a lake, so there's no way I could see something on the other side of it. 2. There is no hill on that section of the road, and there's no hill at all on the road that curves to the right. 3. My car was pretty new to me at that time, but I know how screens work. 4. There's no one in my rearview mirror. I still don't know what happened. If I briefly entered a fugue state and hallucinated everything, or if I was briefly transported to another place and time or what. It was really weird. I still get a twisting feeling in my stomach when I think about it. About 17 years ago, I was working the overnight at a hotel resort as their pastry chef. There had been a change to a wedding's dessert choices. Yes, a case of momzilia. So it is about 2:30 to 3 a.m. I'm switching over the oven for another round of baking, and then step out for a smoke, and I hear a very loud bang, like a wall being hit with a baseball bat full on. I go back inside, absolutely nothing out of place. Figured something had fallen but could find nothing out of place. So start working on some of the other desserts for the party. Went over to check ovens. Heard it and saw it. We had these big 8-inch master locks on the walk-ins because we had some issues with overnight thefts and a security guard that had worked on property. The freezer door was locked because I had no reason to use it, but the door pushed out as far as the lock would let it. This happened again about 20 minutes later. So just to brush off the willies, I said, "If you want it open, and removed the padlock. Silent the rest of the night. The breakfast chef comes in at 5 a.m., sees me a bit out of sorts and shaken up a bit. I bring it up. Look at me like I am totally nuts. About 11 a.m. The chef comes in. I follow him into his office and ask him as well. He had been working on property since he was 15, aside from when he was in college. And point of fact, straight up tells me, no joking, deadly serious, and flat out says, that's probably the old owner's wife. She had passed in the 80s during his second year working there. They had to keep the body in the freezer. Because a blizzard had come through and the road was impassable, she was there for 4 days. On a side note, due to the age of the property and its history, there had been paranormal investigators several times before and after this event. This happened to my dad about 20 years ago, but it's a good story. My dad used to work as a security guard in a building that was, at the time, vacant, but had previously been used as a radio station. They'd had issues with vandalism and intruders, as there were rumors about the building being haunted, which is why they had security in an empty building at night. He heard static coming from a room and went to investigate. The static sound stopped when he walked into the room. The only thing in the room was an old radio, one of those basic battery-operated numbers, not actual radio equipment. He picked up the radio to turn it off, but the IT was already switched off. He flipped it over and realized there were not batteries in the radio. It was old and dusty and in pretty rough shape. He'd recently watched some scary movie about demon possession and decided to try an experiment. He set the radio down on the floor and said, "If Satan is in this room, turn the radio on." Sure as shit, the radio immediately started emitting a very loud cacophony of sounds. He described it as static and voices and off-key screechy music jumbled together. He hightailed it out of there and quit the next morning. Ironically, he ended up working in corrections in a large prison and has all kinds of stories about things that happen in supposedly empty units. Disembodied voices, things moving by themselves, unexplained feelings of being watched. But to this day, he says the radio thing scared him more than anything that's ever happened at the prison. He's a pragmatic, religious guy, which makes it that much more unsettling to me. I worked at a store in downtown Vancouver. There was 2 of us employees to do the closing. It was about 9 p.m., and by this time, we have cleared all the aisles of customers. When we were finished counting the cash, we saw an old lady walking at the very back of the aisles. So I told my coworker to check it out while I go and put the money in the safe. She came back a few minutes later, pale as fuck, and told me she checked everywhere, and there wasn't an old lady at all. The front entrance and exits were locked by a code since we had to get the money out, so an alarm will sound if you open it, even from the inside. We had to check the back where only employees are allowed. You had to punch in your code before going in, or else a loud alarm will go off the moment you push the door open. No one there either. Needless to say, we grabbed our shit and got out of there real fast. I usually do the closing shifts because I like working when it's not busy. And sometimes when I close the lights, I see shadow figures kinda peeking. My coworkers also saw these and feel like they're being watched as soon as the lights are off. It's an old building, but our store was built just the previous year. There was also one time when I heard someone whisper my name in my ear. I yelled, "What the fuck?" so loud, I didn't even care what the customers would think. No one was beside me at all. That aisle was empty. It was crazy. Glad I dipped out of there. This happened when I worked in a hotel right out of high school. I did overnight in the laundry room, but I would help the front desk run invoices to the rooms sometimes. I was on the third floor at like 2 a.m., I think, when I bent down to slide the invoice under the door and a pen flew past my face and hit the door. I didn't keep pens on me, and I checked around the hallway, but it was silent. You know hotel doors, they're heavy, and you can hear people open and close them. I am 100% positive I heard nothing. When I got downstairs, I asked my coworker if they saw anything, but they said they weren't paying attention to the security screen. Really freaked me out. That was the only thing that happened in the 8 months I was there.